For the last century, the quest to define the fundamental architecture of reality has vacillated between the continuous manifolds of classical physics and the discrete quanta of particle mechanics. Standard theoretical frameworks handle the infinite thermodynamic divergences generated by continuous fields as computational errors. Quantum field theory uses a renormalization procedure, which artificially patches the model by subtracting infinities from infinities to extract finite, observable predictions. General relativity encounters a similar boundary condition. The appearance of singularities, points of infinite density and zero volume, marks the exact coordinates where the predictive power of continuous spatial geometry collapses. Accommodating absolute infinity coherently has challenged Western philosophy since Zeno of Elea. It was only during the Enlightenment that thinkers like René Descartes argued the finite human mind could not originate the concept of absolute infinity. It had to be implanted by an infinite substance, granting it a positive ontological status. A severe epistemological rupture is currently underway, formalized under the theory of infinity. This paradigm identifies infinity as the active ontological primitive of the cosmos, repositioning it from a theoretical failure to the primary driver of structure. To observe how infinite potential is geometrically forced into observable reality, we have to abandon continuous classical calculus and map this space using strict discrete boundaries. Bottom-up frameworks like Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory and the standard model of particle physics begin in medias res. They tacitly presuppose the rules of formation, effectively smuggling mathematical structure into the void ex nihilo. The theory of infinity operates on absolute ontological parsimony. It builds observable reality using a single pre-epistemic source and a single formative operator, establishing what is known as the generative triad. The first component is the Psi-Plenum. This is the unbounded generative substrate, the unconditioned continuum of infinite potential and raw material cause. The second component is the Phi-Symmetry. This represents the active structural symmetry that acts as the formal cause, imposing order and isolating invariant topological features from the continuous void. The final component is the theta boundary. It acts as the absolute crystalline surface and final cause, preventing topological collapse into infinite regress. Physical space natively requires these three elements acting in concert to localize the infinite void into a singular point of physical emergence. The physical mechanics begin when the generative potential of the Psi-Plenum pushes against the active organizing force of the Phi-Symmetry. The interaction between this turbulent void and structural symmetry creates an inherent handed asymmetry, known as the primordial twist. This spatial twist is driven by two opposing orientations of topological collapse, pulling toward a central axis: the acute tangent, representing expanding dimensions, and the grave tangent, representing contracting dimensions. When these infinite turbulent tangents collide against the unyielding crystalline stage of the theta boundary, the continuous space is violently shattered and reassembled. This diagram illustrates the geometry forged by that collision, the toroidal monad. The distinct left-to-right and right-to-left collapsing pathways in the center generate all chirality and physical distinction. This process reveals the physical universe as the discrete, quantized wreckage of an ongoing infinite collision, rather than a smooth, empty continuum. We can stress test this framework by abandoning discrete integers and injecting continuous transcendental scalars directly into the geometry. By utilizing the golden angle as the fundamental spatial base, we construct an exponential quadratic universe to evaluate how the topology handles immense internal pressure. This chart models macro-spatial tension. The manifold is supported by a weak structural gravity anchor on the left. Raising the golden angle to the fourth power injects an immense outward expansion force against it, 254 trillion units of continuous pressure. Because the spatial dimension of this universe is squared, the system must violently polarize to survive this internal tension without failing entirely. The equation resolves by ejecting two highly asymmetric physical roots. One tears outward into the infinite cosmos, while the other shrinks inward to a subatomic point. This violent polarization creates a dimensional rift, stretching the physical roots across 28 orders of magnitude and leaving the observable universe appearing as a chaotic, asymmetrical mass of spatial noise. In the 16th century, François Vieta faced a similar collapse in polynomial equations, the casus irreducibilis. He bypassed the chaotic arithmetic by shifting the domain to trigonometry and enforcing triadic symmetry. Vieta's laws dictate the core geometry relies entirely on the structural anchor and origin state. The linear expansion term is absent from Vieta's equation. When the wildly polarized physical limits are multiplied together, the chaotic expansion mathematically cancels itself out, leaving an insulated topological remainder. To decompile this, we take the reciprocal of that product and apply the natural logarithm to strip away the remaining continuous fluid. This extraction yields exactly 2.4, the exact causal seed that originally anchored the singularity. This proves mathematically that the core multiplicit geometry of a system is permanently shielded from the linear scale of its own exponential spatial distortion. This schematic validates topology. The accretion disk's infinite fluid spirals inward, converging into a stable topological weight. The event horizon acts as an eighth-dimensional sieve. Forcing mass into a rigid Euclidean limit generates thermodynamic friction, topological luminosity. The fluid fractures, ejecting as discrete Pythagorean harmonic jets. The massive thermodynamic energy of a quasar is perfectly quantized by the exact inverse cosine barriers defined in foundational topology. Human cognition operates by resolving the same raw thermodynamic noise found in cosmological systems, making the mind subject to identical topological friction. When the mind attempts to process conflicting inputs linearly, without dimensional depth, it collapses into a hyper-compressed point of anxiety. This state, known as cognitive dissonance, mirrors the mathematical failure of a 1D phase space. Conversely, a 2D quadratic mind can stretch across cognitive rifts. This allows the psyche to hold extreme macroscopic abstraction and microscopic detail simultaneously, without shattering. Applying focused logic acts as a psychological natural logarithm. By systematically stripping away the fluid noise of sensory input and external chaos, this operation reveals the underlying causal seed of one's identity. Just as Vieta's sieve insulates the origin of an exponential manifold, the product of a mind's most extreme thoughts remains anchored by the fundamental structural parameters of its geometric hardware. These isomorphisms demonstrate that truth is scale invariant. From black hole accretion disks to the architecture of thought, mathematics provides the indestructible framework that constrains the infinite void.